These are rare accounts of an incident involving a father-in-law at 10,000 meters altitude. The individual central to this event encountered phenomena with over 600 meters of startling data. This became one of the most significant UFO sightings involving a prominent figure. On October 17, 1986, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 departed from Paris, France, en route to Tokyo Narita International Airport. As per the flight plan, the Boeing 747 cargo plane was scheduled to pass over Reykjavik, Iceland, then proceed west across northern Canada, stopping at Anchorage, Alaska, for an international airport layover, before continuing to Tokyo. The cargo mission carried only 3 crew members: the captain, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer. It is noteworthy that the captain, aged 47, possessed extensive flight experience, having served as a fighter pilot. Before transitioning to civil aviation, his cumulative flight time exceeded 10,000 hours. On November 17, around 5 p.m., Flight 1628 reached Alaskan airspace. With clear skies and no clouds, visibility was excellent. This made observation straightforward, but the crew was unaware of what was to come. They were about to experience a terrifying encounter. The plane reached the vicinity of Anchorage around 5:10 p.m. APPROXIMATLY 310 kilometers northeast of the city. At an altitude of 10,600 meters, the cruising speed was roughly 1,000 kilometers per hour. Suddenly, the captain noticed 2 extremely bright white lights at the 10 to 11 o'clock position relative to the aircraft. He initially assumed they were military aircraft, so he did not dwell on it. However, after a few minutes, the light's position relative to the aircraft remained nearly unchanged, causing unease among the crew. At 5:19 p.m., the co-pilot contacted Anchorage Air Traffic Control via radio, inquiring about other aircraft in the vicinity. The tower responded that only Flight 1628 was visible on radar. Despite observing unidentified objects, they did not appear on radar, which deeply unsettled the crew. Simultaneously, the 2 lights began exhibiting unusual behavior. The captain later described their movements as resembling to objects darting playfully. After a few minutes of tracking Flight 1628, at approximately 5:23 p.m., the 2 lights rapidly closed the distance to the aircraft. The approach was remarkably swift. According to the crew, the objects covered the distance from 13.9 kilometers to approximately 1.6 kilometers in about 12 seconds, averaging a speed exceeding 3,700 kilometers per hour. Attempting to identify whether the objects were military or civilian. Continued monitoring the situation. The crew observed what appeared to be intense lights. This time, they were extremely near, approximately 150 to 300 meters away. The light emitted by the objects illuminated the cockpit entirely, and the crew reported feeling a burning sensation on their skin. Concurrently, they finally discerned the appearance of the 2 unidentified objects. From inside the cockpit, the objects appeared comparable in size to their aircraft. Their shape was nearly square, with a vertical orientation. The surfaces featured multiple circular arrays of glowing nozzles or thrusters. These resembled propulsion systems. The captain later provided a sketch depicting the nozzles on both sides. The central fuselage area appeared dark, not entirely black, but with occasional faint glimmers. The glimmers resembled sparks, similar to those produced by burning coal. The crew closely observed the 2 objects. As depicted in the captain's sketch, the objects appeared square from certain angles, but were actually cylindrical, rotating around their central axis. A professional illustrator later refined the sketch, creating a more detailed representation. The 2 objects then increased their distance from the aircraft, maintaining pace with Flight 1628 for a few minutes, before accelerating toward the front left direction and disappearing from view. Their sudden departure allowed the crew to breathe a sigh of relief, unaware that this was merely the beginning of the night's extraordinary events. Minutes later, in the direction where the objects had vanished, the captain observed two lights again. They appeared at the same altitude as Flight 1628, moving at the same speed. However, these lights were noticeably dimmer. Regardless of their movements, they maintained a consistent distance from the aircraft. They appeared to move as a single unit. Due to the surrounding darkness, the crew could not verify their exact nature. Simultaneously, Flight 1628 contacted Anchorage Air Traffic Control again, inquiring if the objects were visible on radar. Two additional objects appeared at the 11 o'clock position. As before, the tower reported that only Flight 1628 was visible on radar, although the captain knew that ground-based, high-altitude radars might not detect the initial two objects. The aircraft's radar was even less likely to do so. Based on his estimation of the object's proximity, he believed they were not far from the aircraft. Hoping to detect something, he adjusted the aircraft's digital radar range to 20 miles, approximately 32 kilometers, and set the radar angle to level. Upon doing so, he observed on the screen a large, circular object at the 10 o'clock position, minus 110 to 20 kilometers away. As the radar detected the object, it began to move, quickly positioning itself at the lower left rear of Flight 1628, still maintaining synchronization with the aircraft. However, the radar lost track of the object, and it was difficult to observe from the cockpit. The aircraft continued its course. In the distance, lights from Eielson Air Force Base and Fairbanks grew increasingly visible, although the objects had not yet posed a direct threat to the aircraft's safety. The crew remained deeply unsettled. Their anxiety stemmed from their inability to identify the objects or their intentions. The situation grew increasingly tense. As the flight gradually ascended, the captain glanced back once more, noticing the lights following them. This observation heightened his concern. The outline of a massive object began to emerge more clearly, resembling an enormous entity in the darkness in the night sky. It gradually revealed its imposing form. The object had a walnut-like shape, with a central band, emitting the lights previously observed. These lights originated from both sides of the object. The captain provided a sketch of this object, depicting it alongside the Boeing 747 freighter. The object's immense size was evident, estimated by the captain to be at least twice the size of an aircraft carrier, exceeding 600 meters in length. This scale was beyond the capabilities of human technology at the time. The captain also observed smaller objects orbiting the larger one. He later referred to it as a mothership. The scene was visually striking, profoundly impacting the three crew members. They immediately contacted Anchorage Air Traffic Control, requesting permission to turn the aircraft 40 degrees to the right and simultaneously reduce altitude to avoid the massive unidentified object. The tower approved the request, but the maneuver proved ineffective. The object appeared to remain locked onto Flight 1628, maintaining its relative position. Following the tower's advice, the captain adjusted the altitude again and altered the flight direction, executing a full 360-degree turn. After completing the turn, the captain believed they had evaded the object. However, as the flight stabilized, they were shocked to discover that the object reappeared in its previous position. Fortunately, during the maneuver, Anchorage Air Traffic Control's radar finally detected the unidentified object. It was located behind Flight 1628, approximately 8 kilometers away. Concurrently, radar at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage also detected the object. This confirmation prompted Anchorage Air Traffic Control to urgently inquire if the crew required assistance. They offered to deploy fighter jets for support, but the captain declined, recalling a 1948 incident where a U.S. military plane crashed while pursuing a UFO. He feared a similar outcome. This decision was significant, as it reflected the crew's caution. Further details on this may be explored later. The massive object continued to shadow the flight, and at that moment, United Airlines Flight 69 departing from Anchorage to Fairbanks, entered the same airspace as Flight 1628. Anchorage Air Traffic Control promptly decided to direct this aircraft closer to Flight 1628 for visual confirmation. Soon after, United Airlines Flight 69 approached Flight 1628, just as its captain informed the tower that Flight 1628 was in sight. The crew of Flight 1628 was stunned to observe that the massive object trailing them had vanished without a trace. Approximately 120 kilometers north of Talkeetna, Flight 1628's extraordinary encounter with the unidentified objects finally concluded. The entire incident lasted approximately 50 minutes. At 6:20 p.m., Japan Airlines Flight 1628 landed safely at Anchorage International Airport. The crew was subsequently questioned by the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA). This incident did not gain immediate public attention. It was not until December that the London bureau chief of Kyodo News learned of the event through reliable sources. The chief interviewed the captain, who was staying at a London hotel, following the release of the interview as a news report. The extraordinary UFO incident became public knowledge. It rapidly gained global attention. This event, and the captain's public statements to the media, significantly impacted his career. Japan Airlines determined that a pilot claiming to have seen a UFO could have adverse effects. Consequently, he was removed from flight duties and reassigned to ground-based administrative work. This decision reflected the prevailing skepticism at the time. Many believed that UFO sightings were non-existent. Claiming to have witnessed such an event could suggest mental instability, rendering a pilot unfit for duty. This perspective also raised a possibility. It suggested that other pilots or aviation personnel may have witnessed similar phenomena, but refrained from reporting them. This consideration is compelling. Fear of repercussions likely influenced reporting decisions. The FAA initiated an investigation immediately following the incident. As the incident garnered widespread attention, public demand grew for the FAA to release its investigation report. However, the FAA declined to do so, possibly to avoid controversy. Consequently, during a press conference on March 5, 1987, the FAA provided an official statement. They claimed insufficient evidence existed to confirm the presence of a UFO during the incident. In essence, they could not verify the accuracy of the pilot's account. More than a decade later, John Callahan, the FAA investigator assigned to the case, came forward with new information. He disclosed authentic audio recordings of communications between the pilots and the tower. Additionally, he revealed that after the incident, the FBI, the CIA, and a special operations group under President Reagan's administration convened a joint meeting to discuss the event. During this meeting, they acknowledged the incident's authenticity. A CIA representative then instructed attendees to swear to secrecy, declaring that the meeting never occurred and the event itself never happened. When Callahan inquired about the reasoning, he initially suspected the object might have been a stealth aircraft. The CIA official clarified, stating this was the first instance of recorded radar data on a UFO. They chose to withhold this information from the public. The official noted that releasing the data would excite and overwhelm the public. When asked why the information was suppressed, he responded, "Disclosure could lead to public panic." While many believe the captain witnessed a non-human aerial phenomenon, alternative explanations have been proposed. For instance, on January 29, 1987, The Washington Times published an article by skeptic Philip Klass. The lights observed were merely bright planets, specifically Jupiter and Mars. This conclusion was primarily based on the FAA's interview with the co-pilot. However, subsequent investigation revealed the co-pilot's limited English proficiency led to miscommunication during the FAA interview, resulting in a misunderstanding. This caused the erroneous interpretation. Moreover, even without the co-pilot's statement, the captain's detailed description makes it clear the objects could not have been stars. Stars do not move erratically, appear as large objects, or register on radar. Beyond this explanation, others have speculated that the objects might have been a classified U.S. military aircraft or reflections of ice crystals illuminated by moonlight. Other theories suggested radar malfunctions. However, Most of these explanations have significant flaws and lack conclusive evidence. Ultimately, the investigation into the incident has long been closed, but its revelations present a compelling possibility. The incident remains unresolved, suggesting that extraterrestrial phenomena may exist. Perhaps such entities are already among us,